Hey pals, Sean here from the Comics Pals. I got Tyler with me,
Hey, how's it going, guys?
and we have a very, very special guest we are super excited to talk to. This is actually round two with one of
Yeah.
our favorite creators around here. We have Mr. Joshua Williamson. Josh, how are you today?
Hello. How are you guys doing?
Sorry I caught you on your water sip there, but
That's okay. I forget. Are you guys? Because you guys are on YouTube, right? This isn't just a podcast. You're on YouTube. Yeah. So I was
yeah,
like,
Yeah.
oh wait a minute, I'm on camera. I remember like, oh, that's right. This is not just a podcast. Yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah. But I'm good. Yeah. Like as we were kind of talking before, I'm just always doing a lot. that's
Indeed. And
that's
I mean,
yeah.
we're here to talk specifically about, Cobra Commander, Duke, and the incredible things that you're doing with the Energon Universe, being one of the spearheads of that. But you're
Mhm.
also really busy with a lot of other things. We just talked about off camera. Dark Ride had just ended.
Yeah.
There's a lot of DC stuff going on.
Mhm.
So you really have your irons in the fire right now. How does it feel to be at a place where coming from when you were young and just wanting
Wow.
to do comics, to be at a place where you're telling people, "Hey, I've got too much going on."
It's really weird. It's weird. I think that like and that's probably why I have too much going on, because it's like I've wanted this since I was a little kid. This is it, right? Like I just wanted to write comic books this whole time. And it's like you want to do it all, like especially when you're coming up, you're like every character, every book, every idea, every little thing, every little like thing you love and obsessed with. You want to do it all. And so you do get to a point where you're like, you probably do say yes to too much. But it's hard because you're like, of course I want to do that. Like I think you and I maybe talked about this before about like Green Arrow was one of those books that I probably should have said no to, but it was like I have wanted to write that book as a little kid. So how do you say no to that? It's like of course I want to do that. And I want to put and then you don't want to half-ass it either, right? Like you want to put the work, you want to put yourself into that book. And so, it's surreal, dude. It's funny because like once you get really into it, you're just like you don't have time to think about that stuff. You're just like, I have deadlines. I gotta turn this in. You don't get to ground yourself and appreciate the moment sometimes. And I think that's something I talk to a lot of other writers about is just have these moments where you let yourself appreciate like, oh shit, I can do this thing. This is great. It's crazy. Like, I mean, I'll get Nailbiter as an example, right? Like when I did Nailbiter with Image, the thing with Nailbiter was that like I had pitched it around and people had said no. Like it got rejected a few times, or there was like, the notes felt to a point where I like it wouldn't be the book anymore.
Hmm.
And then when I finally got an Image, like that was something I really fought for. I really believed in it. And I was like, I can do this. This is the book for me. I know it. It is crazy to me to think Nailbiter number one came out 10 years ago this month, May of
Yeah.
2014. So now to be like, man, I still remember that. I remember those rejections. I remember talking to people about it. I remember the like fight and the struggle and the like, well, I'm just gonna roll up my sleeves and me and Mike, we're just gonna do it. We'll do it in Image, let's go. And then being really thankful that Eric Stevenson said yes. Like I can feel, Mike and I are funny. Mike and I have only spoken on the phone maybe twice the entire time we've known each other. Mike Henderson, we always text. Or obviously I see him in person. We've been on Zooms together, but like we met in person the day Nailbiter number one came out. We did a sign together.
Wow.
So here's the thing: I can think of when Eric Stevenson said yes, and I called Mike on the phone, and there was like that feels like that was not that long ago, you know. But that was over 10 years ago. That was almost 11 years ago.
Wow.
So and it's saying with Birthright, like Birthright Skybound that came out, and it's like this stuff with Skybound. Like, dude, we've been talking about this GI Joe stuff for, man. I was in a different office. That was like 2 offices ago. I had one kid, not two kids, and my son is he is 4.5. So I'm like, that's how long ago some of these conversations started about GI Joe.
Wow.
It is surreal, man. It's just surreal, but I'm thankful for it. Like I don't, I still am able to ground myself and be like, I get to absorb like, holy shit, I got to do this thing. I get to do this stuff. I'm still able to ground myself sometimes and do that, but yeah, it's surreal, dude. It's weird sometimes.
And
Yeah.
like,
Well, go ahead, Tyler.
and like as a fan, having like since I've been picking up like single issues and in college and stuff,
Mhm.
I was picking up Ghosted, You know, that was one of my favorite books
Oh
coming out
yeah,
at the time. And
yeah.
like just seeing you to be like you're able to kind of go from there to doing some really cool stuff. I mean, you did a Crisis for Christ's sake, you know, like
Oh, dude, listen, I think about that sometimes too. I'm like one of what, like 5 people,
yeah, a very short
right? And I
list.
think, you know, yeah, it's a small handful of people. The day that Dark Crisis #7 came out, you know, I had this moment of like, man, I wish I had, you know, the closer we got to the ending, the more I realized I was running out of room. And I was like, man, I wish I had like, I wish this was 12, wish she's on 7, basically. So I was frustrated with the ending a little bit. And then out of nowhere, Jeff Johns emailed me about it and basically was like praising the event and like talking about it was like he read my mind and was talking about some of the stuff. And then he's like, you are one of a very rare group of people who got to do a Crisis. Like, enjoy it, basically. You know, he was like, yeah, and that is it. Like, it's crazy. Like, dude, I you go back to when I was in college and I was like, I really want to write for DC Comics, and then to go from that to, you know, working on a Crisis, and then when with Skybound, it's like, which is yeah, it's surreal, all that stuff. And I have this, you know, like you're saying Ghosted, because Ghosted was a Skybound book too, and that was a book that I really started figuring out who I was as a writer, and starting like pieces started coming together that I feel like I was struggling with before Ghosted, and like GI Joe was a thing where like I no joke, I had a GI, I think we maybe talked about this before. I had a GI Joe notebook
Yeah.
that I would put ideas in, and I was like, none of this is ever gonna happen. None of this is ever. I always approach. It's funny. I'm a very I feel like I'm a very hopeful, optimistic person, but I'm also very grounded in reality, and I have a lot of like, yeah, but none of this is gonna happen. Like I approach everything like that in a weird way. But yeah, I had this GI Joe notebook, which is full of ideas, and I'm like, yeah, but none of this is gonna happen. And then you know we're doing it. Like the ideas that I had, we're doing. So it's yeah, do all this stuff. I mean, it's funny, and like that's one thing about the GI Joe stuff. It's been really interesting is that like I had a lot of fun doing them, and it's been like writing Duke and Cobra Commander has been. It was just fun. It was just really fun to do those books. I had zero thoughts, I guess I should say. I'm not sure how to word this. The response has been shocking to me. Like it has been surprising to me because it's like I knew we were doing something special. I knew we were doing something that we liked, like me and Daniel and Robert and the other people at Skybound, you know, like Sean Makowitz. I knew we were making something that we liked. And I remember reading Daniel's Transformers early on and being like, I knew we were doing something fun, but then to see how people in the stores and people who were like, you know, comic fans have really responded to it has been really surprising. And like with Cobra Commander in particular, I would tell people like, I kept warning people, and I think I talked to you guys about this too back then. I was like, it's a weird comic book. It is not really what you're gonna expect. And part of that was me prepping people to be like, I wasn't joking around. This is not gonna be what you expect. And then just see the response of it. That stuff has been is crazy. Like I'm just glad it's doing well. And what I keep hearing from retailers, people are coming in and buying them, and it's like that's what you want at this point. Especially at the point of view I have of comics. Like I want people going into the store and buying books from the store, and to know that like Duke and Cobra Commander play a part in that. You know, like it's so crazy. Yeah.
But I think it's a testament in a lot of ways to your passion, not just as a storyteller, but as a fan of the material.
Mm-hmm.
That shines through. As someone who like I've maybe seen GI Joe like a couple of times, you know, that the
Mm-hmm.
shows. Now I'm reading these comic books and I'm like, holy shit, am I a GI Joe fan now? Is that what Joshua Williamson has turned me
Yeah.
into now? Like I did not expect to care so much about Duke or like the origins of these associations and these groups. And you know, every time you introduce a new character, it's like I'm sure that for someone who's like a big fan of GI Joe, this is a moment, but for me it's like this is the beginning, and I feel good about that. Like that's exciting for me, and it helps that the stories are so good.
Thanks. Yeah. Tyler, something you were gonna say? You had a question?
You know, I was actually gonna say like I'm kind of with Sean in the sense that like my love for GI Joe has mainly been like, oh, the action figures are really freaking cool.
Oh yeah.
But in
Yeah.
terms of like other media, it wasn't really there for me. And this being
Mhm.
essentially a jumping on point, and you're seeding out, you know, like reading Duke and then reading Cobra Commander, and I'm seeing like, oh, the connections in between the two. And
Mhm.
I'm like, I feel like I'm on the ground level of a really, really cool universe. And I think the fan response has been great because like usually when you get a property like this, an IP like this, it becomes
Mhm.
heated and contested, especially when there's
Oh
different
yeah.
versions of the characters and everything like that. But I've only really seen like positive stuff. But to be fair, I'm not totally engaged in the
Oh
fandom.
yeah, I'm not. I mean, dude, it's been interesting to me too because like I am. You know how it is. I'm sure you guys have seen this. Like you can be a fan of something. There's a difference between being a fan of something and then being a fanatic or being like locked into the fandom for
Oh yeah.
something. And like with GI Joe, it's like I have all the toys. I was a big fan. I was a kid. The cartoons. Um, I was never that plugged into the comics until later when they did reprints in the end of the 90s, early 2000s. They did some reprints, the Marvel ones. That was the first time I started really reading it and being like, oh crap, this is really good. People told me it was good, but at the time I would write it off, which is funny about this stuff, right? I would write it off as like, oh, well, those are licensed books. I didn't know the real history of it until probably it was before the Devil Through comics started. But when I look at this stuff, it's like all those things you're talking about, that stuff was in our head. It was like, we want to make sure that we're respectful to what has come before. We're respectful to those fans. Like that idea that every single one of these characters, none of them were a joke. Like somebody loves these characters, right? Everyone has their favorite. So don't treat any of them like it's a joke. Don't make it funny. Be respectful of it. Be respectful of Source Note. Be respectful of what Larry Hama did. But we also have to prioritize new readers. Like we have to prioritize people that are coming in that don't know it or are very casual, that don't understand this world. And then to start small, it's like, I mean, you look at something like Invincible, and Invincible, when you really think about the opening scenes of Invincible, where it's like he's taking the trash out, you know, and it's like that's a human thing. It is human. He's taking the trash out. Next thing is superpowers. You look at that, and you look at like issue 100, and it's like the world that he built and the story that Robert built across that. That was something that Robert also said at the beginning. He was like, start really small and then let's go out from there. Right. So it was like, okay, well, we're doing that. That means we're starting with Duke in this down place. Right. And then, we present who he was in a down place. Cobra Commander, it was like, that's why we actually started with him in the bar, because we were like, we didn't want to immediately dive into like, and then here's Cobra-La. Right. And we also went out and understanding that, where it was like, we have to do something different from what has come before. And maybe that, and obviously having Transformers be a piece of the origin of these things is definitely a part of that. But then to be like, oh no, and then here's Cobra-La, all this stuff from the get-go, right? Yeah, we just really try to approach it from like, let's make sure that this is something that can be accessible for new people, but is so respectful of it. And I think that's my thoughts on, it was Robert. I had talked to Skybound for a long time about this stuff, but there was an interview Robert did. I was there, I was sitting next to him, but Robert was doing an interview about it. And he was like, one of the reasons why he wanted me was he was like, it was very clear that I could take a property that had a deep history and then use that history while also moving it forward. And it's like, that's how I saw things with Flash, saw things with Superman. And so that's the same thing with this, is like just taking us and move forward with it. But at the same time, like my golden rule, and this is the thing I really try to not lose sight of. And in some ways, I'm glad that I wrote the majority of this before it came out, right? So like I wrote the majority of Cobra, I wrote the majority of Duke before the issue ones came out. That I was able to not get like too in my head about it, right? Like, because you hear those stories where like a book comes out and all of a sudden the pressure suddenly hits, and then then they start making different decisions. It's almost like it sounds crazy. It's like, oh no, the gods are watching, so I better be my best behavior, versus just like I have that the whole thing of like dance like no one's watching kind of thing.
Right.
And I feel like that's how we were on these books. Particularly, I was like, I'm just doing this. I'm having fun. We're having fun. We're enjoying it. Like I was writing it for myself, and I'm glad that happened, because I wonder about myself now, would I have written it differently, knowing like, oh no, people are gonna like this. Like that sounds silly, but that is sort of what I'm coming up. But I was thinking with Duke. I remember thinking like, when I was working on Duke, I had a very clear understanding what I was going to do with him. And with Cobra Commander, which came out organically differently, right? I knew they were going to be on parallel journeys, but I was like, this Cobra Commander book is not going to be what people expect. So I was really just like, I had no idea how people were going to respond to it. And I will say, I mean, even with the stuff in issue 3 of Cobra Commander, where it was the bloody face, the happy face,
Mhm.
like that just came to me while I was writing it. Like I was just like, oh, I need Cobra Commander to smile. Like I need him to smile at the ending, like the violence. He's happy. He got his way, right? He manipulated them, and Nemesis Enforcer has now come in and he's killing them. I need to show him smile somehow, and I'm like, I can't because he has the metal face on. And then I was like, oh, what if like Ripper painted on his face, you know, like in his own blood on his face when they're torturing him? And I was like, okay, I'm gonna see if I can get away with this. Let's see if we can take this. But dude, like that was the moment, and I actually had this conversation with some retailers. I feel like that was a moment where it like, I don't know how to put this. It feels like it's leveled up somehow in that moment, right? Like I think there was something about that moment in the book that people really like clicked into. Um, and it was funny because that was the third issue, and I would hear from retailers who were like, people are coming in now and buying all three and buying the second or third printings of issue 1 because they saw what was happening in 3. Um, yeah, it's interesting with that book because again, I was just like, that was all for me. Like that was what I would enjoy seeing, you know, and all that. And like the end of that issue, the end of issue 3, where Nemesis Enforcer like pulls out the rips the flesh off and has the wings for the first time.
Crazy.
Dude, that was like one of the first ideas we had for this whole thing was like when we see Nemesis Enforcer for the first time, it has to be a 2-page spread, and he is about to rage out. And to get to that moment, like that's one of the earliest conversations we had. It was like, Nemesis Enforcer is going to be his bodyguard, but we're not going to tell people. We're going to try to keep it secret. And in the moment he's revealed, like make him feel dangerous and scary. Um, that was something we had paid off. So I think the fact that we kind of earned it. It was interesting how there were some people I saw basically figure it out right out the gate, and I was like, good, because you know what I mean. It's like that's a good sign of what we're doing, where it's like what we're talking about, where it's like people that are really really in the know, they're getting something out of it. But if you're not in the know, that's a real reveal to you. But it works on both ways because it's almost like satisfying. Of like I was right, it was Nemesis Enforcer, or holy shit, who is this guy? Like it works in both ways. Yeah,
I was
that's
in that second camp,
yeah.
man.
Who the
I
fuck is
was
this
like,
guy? Yeah.
holy shit,
Mhm.
what just happened? Who is that? Like, is this like I had so many questions, and it made me feel good to have those questions.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, if I want to know more, there's a whole host of things that I can look at to actually learn more.
To
There
get with
is
him.
lore.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can watch that movie. I mean, I think the movie is really the thing that we the animated movie is something we talk about a lot when we're working on stuff because we that was part of it. Like we went back and looked at that, but we all just like that visual, you know? It was so cool. And I remember last year we were at San Diego Comic Con, and I had that scene hadn't been drawn yet, but we were talking to Hasbro and they showed us the toy for Nemesis Enforcer, and I was like, oh man, we were on it. Like, and they had so we ended up using his design, the design for the toy. But it was one of those things where it's like going through the channels and make sure we do everything right, and that was one of the things. Was we were like, oh, we're introducing them. We're gonna show Nemesis Enforcer again at the same time as they're about to release a new toy. We should try to like have synergy there. But yeah, that character is so cool. He's such a cool visual, you
Yeah.
know? Like, and he's so badass and dangerous. We're like, all right, let's really play this up. And yeah, I don't know. I have more thoughts on Nemesis. It's funny. There's different names for him. That might be too much of a spoiler to get into for something else. But,
Well,
you
dude,
know, yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with Resident Evil at all, but
Mm-hmm.
he reminded me of Mr. X, just this completely like badass, no ability to stop them
Yeah.
Terminator, and then he ripped his body apart. Like he
Oh, yeah.
started crazy,
That's
right?
it. Yeah. Yeah.
That
And then we,
was just
dude, I couldn't believe, like, I mean, the stuff with him where he killed that guy in issue 2, where he ripped his arms off and headbutted his head off at the same time. I was like, I was just it was funny with this book because I was like trying to navigate what was too much.
mm,
And I was like, well, I'm looking at the cartoon more than the comics. And the reason why I did that was because to me, Larry Hama is the comics. And because he's continuing to write the comics, that is what that is. So I'm not going to, I can't duplicate what he's doing. So why try, right? Like, let's do my version of things. And so I looked at the cartoon a lot. And then I was like, okay, but then I need to take this cartoon to the next level. And some of that meant a bit more violence, a bit more blood. But coming with that was like raising the stakes. Like, not don't make it cartoonish, but you know, and I think that's what we did. We took it. Oh, there was a conversation I had early on with them with Skybound, and it was not Cobra Commander, but it was things in general where I was like, instead of trying to take the things we loved as kids and change them and try to age them up, let's just embrace it because there's a reason we loved it when we were kids. Right. So take those things we loved as kids and then just find new points of view at it versus it's funny you see that, right? Like sometimes people will take this thing and they transfer to their media and they go, well, now we have to like make it for grown-ups or whatever. We have to, I'm not even sure the right word is for that, but it's like they try to change it. You know, they're like, well, now this is the thing I think about the Iron Man movie a lot, where it's like, I think that first Iron Man movie worked for many reasons, right? Because it was like Robert Downey Jr. on fire, right? Like he nailed it. Tony Stark nailed it. It felt, and I think because we all knew like Robert Downey Jr.'s story, it was like, yeah, that's Tony Stark. Like we all agreed that was like one of the best castings ever out the gate. But dude, that Iron Man movie works because that's Iron Man. Like they didn't try to change his armor. That looks like Iron Man. That looks like the same Iron Man without the stands. Like it looks like Iron Man. That looks like Tony Stark. That looks like Pepper Potts. Like, you know, there were pieces of that movie that it was just like those parts that have worked for at that time almost 60 years, right? Like they worked for a reason. So why are we trying to change those pieces that work? Like there's a reason those things tend to time. And as soon as I find when people go into these things, they try to like reject the stuff that's working for some reason. I don't understand it, you know? So with this, I was like, let's not try to reject the stuff that's working. You know, let's dive into the stuff we love and then add new points of view to it more than trying to change it. That's my thoughts on Superman a lot, where I'm like, I think Superman is a weird mix of like the easiest character to write, but also the hardest character to write. And one of the mistakes I think I've seen people do is you try to change the character too much. It's like, no. Clark is Clark. Like, you know, what you do is you dump him in new situations and you put him up against new things because you cannot change him. That's part of his whole character, right? Like, so you can't. And it's the same thing with these things where it was like looking at Duke and being like, I'm not going to change who Duke is, but I can show you why he's cool. And I can put him in situations where we can test him and make him shine. And it was the same thing with Cobra Commander. Now, Cobra Commander, I'm definitely rating Cobra Commander differently, but I feel like it was there. It was there. Like, this is a manipulative person who is a crazy person, right? It's like he is psychotic. He's always been that way. But I think the biggest change we made with Cobra Commander, it was that one thing. I might have said to you guys last time we talked. It's like, this is a Cobra Commander who doesn't run away. He does not retreat. Because before, Cobra Commander was always known for being like, oh no, let's retreat. Oh no, let's retreat. Like, he was cowardly, right? That was the thing. And I was like, let's make him not cowardly, you know? And that was the only real change we made with his character, is let's make him not cowardly. And I think that's part of what has been really interesting with him, of like writing him, is like, it's not a North Star, but it's like, no, this is a character that will, when there's a moment of danger, doesn't run away. And he kind of like, doesn't make it worse, but he definitely is like, I'm smarter than you. Right. So I can get through this. So that's part of, like I can outthink you. I mean, it's the thing with the Dreadnought where he's talking to them and he's just like, you know, I try to make them where they're respectful, but you know, the Dreadnoughts are the Dreadnoughts. And it's like, you know, notoriously obsessed with grape soda and donuts. They're not exactly like the smartest people in the books, really. They're dangerous and they're fun. But to put someone like Cobra Commander against them, where Cobra Commander is like, you idiots, you know, I can manipulate them to get what I want. But the thing is that he knows if push came to shove, they would win. Like he can't stop them. Like they're physically stronger than him, right? They are deadlier than him in some way. So he's like, well, he's my mind. That's why that whole scene, it's like in issue 3 where it was just him talking with them. You know, it was on purpose. Like there's a part where Zarana, I did it on purpose. Almost every time Cobra Commander and Zarana are talking, I think there's maybe 2 lines that aren't this, but Cobra Commander only answers her in questions. He doesn't respond to her with direct answers. He always basically throws the question back at her. And I did that on purpose because I wanted to show like that's like obvious manipulation tactics. And she knows he's doing that and then gets angry later in the issue. You know, it's Yeah, it's been fun writing these books. I don't know. It's easy to talk about. It's just fun. They're just writing them, you know? Yeah.
Well, they're also fun to read, and I highly encourage you guys that are listening to check these out. So, Duke, 5 issues, tremendous. Cobra Commander, 5 issues. If you're hearing this, that means that Cobra Commander 5 has dropped.
Yeah.
And like we said earlier, we had the chance to read it.
Great.
Fantastic. Go pick up these books. This is like, it feels to me personally like being able to be there at the start of something that's like
Yeah.
really cool and special. Like if you were there at the start of, like, let's say the Ultimate Universe the first time around, or even
Yeah,
the
I
start of the
was there.
Marvel or DC. Like it
But
feels
yeah,
like that.
can you imagine? I always talk to people about this that are like, they worked at DC or Marvel, but DC. I'll ask them about things like Watchmen, because it's different. I mean, even with me, where it's like Watchmen is something that I read later, right? Like I was alive when Watchmen was coming out, but I was not plugged into comics that way at that time. Uh, but it's funny, you talk to people that are like, what was it like when Watchmen was coming out? And they're like, oh man, they would find out that either script pages were coming in or that Dave Gibbons was having pages either faxed in or mailed in, whatever. And they would sit around that fax machine as each page came out just so they could read it, and they knew that's always the thing I'm always curious about. Do people know their, how do I put this? Because it sounds silly with comics, I guess, but it's like there are historical moments in comics, right? Like, do you know you're in the moment?
Right.
Right. And I got it right there. I was like, did they know they were in the moment with Watchmen? And they're like, yes, they knew because the stuff was coming in. They were just like, holy shit. They knew. There are certain things where sometimes, I heard there are projects. I'm not going to say what it is. There's a very, very famous project that has done really well. It's like stood the test of time. People love it to this day. It is an evergreen comic book. And there's two of them like this, actually. There's two evergreen comics. If I told you what you were, you'd both be like, I love them, right? That I've heard stories about people in the offices making fun of them while they were being produced and
What?
clown. Right? There's two projects. They're both from the 2000s, but major projects that to this day are considered like evergreen. Like everybody loves them, right? There is no question these are good comic books that at the time people in the offices would make fun of them. So it's weird, dude. Like it isn't always people don't always are plugged in. They don't always go like, yeah, this is something special, and then it comes out and they're like, oh shit, I guess that we were wrong. Like that does happen sometimes. There's a couple projects. The more I think about it, there's been a few projects like that where people don't recognize in the moment. But I mean, I remember when Vision was coming out with Tom. Tom and I didn't know each other yet. Like now he's like one of my best friends. But we didn't know each other at the time. But I remember when the preview came out for Vision, just the preview, I was like, dang, this is something special. Like you could feel it. And I went to the comic book store and they were sold out of Vision, but all they had left was a $10 variant that they were doing. It was like the album covers at that time. Remember they were doing all
Yep.
the album covers, the homages. And I was like, I'm gonna buy it because I want to read it. Like I have to read this. Like that's how I was feeling about the moment. And so it felt like, oh yeah, this thing's building. And I do feel like that with what we're doing right now. I feel like, I remember seeing Daniel's pages on Transformers and just being like, whoa, like this is something else. And then you looking at what Robert had planned for Void Rivals before, right? And knowing it and then seeing those pages and seeing Jetfire for the first time, you're like, oh, he's really doing it. And now knowing what I know about Void Rivals, it's like there's stuff coming from Void Rivals that are really, really exciting and really fun that I think people are gonna pop for. And yeah, dude, it is weird. It's like to be at the beginning of this thing. But I'm definitely trying to just keep having fun with it, and not get too much in my head about the stuff we're doing. But at the end of the day, it's like it's just fun, and I really love these characters. Yeah, five was interesting because five was probably the hardest issue to write because, as you guys know, there's like a little bit of a time jump, like a tiny time jump. And there were reasons for that. There's stuff going on with it, but yeah, like that issue, like seeing Destro and Cork Banner meet for the first time, and how they respond to each other, and how you can really still feel like Cobra Commander he is still a psycho, but he is slowly becoming Cobra Commander. Like you can feel like he is becoming that person still, but he's still the psycho. He's not gonna be the coward. He's still this dude, but what I'm trying to build with him is that like versus, you know, Cobra Commander has many weaknesses as a person, I guess you'd say, right? Like, but before it was him being a coward, but he also had an ego. His ego would get the better of him, and I think you can start seeing the seeds of that in five. You can start seeing that like he is a bit of an egomaniac, and that will cause problems for him down the line. And that's what I was trying to do a little bit with five. And then also just give Andrea like amazing stuff to draw. You know, I really love working with him. I had never heard of him before. I never worked with him before. Skybound recommended him. I saw his stuff. I think I was already following him on Instagram. And so I was like, this guy's dope. And then he just freaking nailed it on all five issues. And so, but I was always like, all right, this guy gets it. So I gotta give him more fun, cool stuff to draw. And that was part of five, was being like, you know, there's that scene with the bats and all that stuff. Like just giving him more and more fun stuff to draw in that without getting too deep into spoilers. I don't know how deep you guys want to get into it, but yeah, like I think the only thing I would want to mention is the what happens at the ending. Even though like there's, I'm not sure it's totally clear, but yeah, this stuff happens at the ending. And yeah, you have to read the thing I posted this recently. You have to read Duke 5, then the Energon special, and then Cobra Grand 5, because they go in order like that. Like that's what, because you can see the stuff that happens in 5. Part of what happens in 5 is because of the Energon special.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
Right.
the pieces that are in there. Yeah.
Well, I think what is so exciting to me about five is the fact that, you know, we've watched this character kind of go through this journey. He's not,
Mhm.
so you're not supposed to like him, but you grow to understand who he
Yeah.
is, you know. And then there's this, it's sort of his ascension that we've been witnessing. And I have no idea what's going to happen next. I don't know the historic relationships between some of these characters. And then
Mhm.
you add on the wrinkle of the energon of it all. And that's
Yeah.
something that's been flowing throughout the series. And we kind of see some of that advance as well in five. And so, Josh, I mean, you have me hooked.
Oh, good, man. Yeah, I'm glad. That's the goal, man. Is get people who never read it before. Like there was somebody Makowitz at Skybound told me a story about somebody who had like never didn't know anything about GI Joe, Cobra, nothing. It was a blind spot. You know, we all have them. We all have like some sort of fandom that you're like, I don't know anything about that, right? First of all, I don't know anything about it. But they read Duke and Cobra Commander 1, and they went out and they bought like a bunch of toys of like, you know, they bought the characters that were in it. They were like, oh, I'm gonna buy Duke and Stalker, Rock and Roll, and they bought Cobra Commander, and you know, they were just like, now I'm in it. Now I'm like, what's the rest of this stuff? And I'm like, that's the goal. That's the goal, because it's like we want to, you know, that's the thing is like with this, it's like we don't want to just make these books. Like we want to really contribute to the mythology and to this world. Like I mean, because the world goes beyond this, right? Because you have Hasbro, you have this much bigger thing. We want to make sure that we're actually like giving positive contributions to that fandom too, you know. So yeah, like it's we don't want to advertise the toys, but I love the toys. Like I have them all here in my office. You know,
The
like,
classified series.
here. What's that?
The
Oh yeah,
classified series. Yeah. Oh, that one's great. Yeah.
Yeah, this is well. This is the one that came with the. I don't know why it's so fuzzy. This is the one that came with the his tank.
Yeah.
It was the tank one. Yeah, I love this one. I have his. He has a globe, but like on my desk, I have like a whole Cobra Commander like platoon over here on my desk, and then I got his tank, and then I got this thing. It's the I got this in the mail the other day, and I haven't opened it yet, but this goes to the back of his tank. Yeah, I love all this stuff.
Dude, but imagine being able to go back in
Yeah.
time and talk to yourself as a kid and say, yeah, you're gonna have a room full of GI Joes and Cobra Commanders and even some of the DC stuff and all that. You're gonna have all of that, and it's gonna be a part of your job. And on top of that, this stuff that you love, you're actually gonna be able to influence and meaningfully add to in a way that's forever, that will outlive you.
Oh yeah, dude, that's something. It's interesting to look at it like that. And I know that comics is funny because comics is a thing that moves, right? Like it is it's every week, and it's fast. And there is a hint of like, what have you done for me lately in comics? Like no matter what, you have to like keep up with it. But then you start realizing it's not about keeping up with it; it's about making meaningful contributions to it, you know. And that's something you start looking at this stuff. But dude, if I went back in time and looked at myself as a kid, man, it's like, you know, it's weird. I I wonder about my personality, how I would be. I think myself would have been like happy for me. I'm trying to think this out. Now I'm like, I think I would definitely be like in shock of it. But then also, I think there's a part of me that would be like, yeah, but what about this, this, and this? You know what I mean? It's like, oh, you haven't read Spider-Man yet? Like, you know what I mean? I think there's a part of my brain as a kid, but it's like, yeah, when I was a kid, like I wanted to work on G.I. Joe stuff. I wanted to work for DC characters, particularly once I got into high school and college. It was like very much aware of the things I wanted to do, and I think I used this before too. It's like I only work on stuff I'm obsessed with, right? Like I have to feel it. The times I haven't, it's been really obvious. Like, oh, I messed up, right? Uh, or took jobs for the wrong reasons. Like it's been obvious to me when I've messed them up. But yeah, like if I went back in time and like sat myself down and explained this as a little kid, I really wonder how I would react to it. Would I? Because also you know this, that like getting in this as a job where you are doing this regularly, making money regularly, it is real hard. And I
Right.
think I had so many people tell me, don't bother. Like it's impossible. I had so many people when I was a kid. Um, I would go to conventions. Like I started going to San Diego Comic Con when I was like 14, 15 years old. And then going to like local shows and stuff in California. And people were just like, man, it was fun. I remember there was one creator I met when I was in high school at a convention, and I was like, I want to write comic books. And he looked at me and he goes, stay in school.
Good
And that was it.
advice, but
No, I was like, well, do you recommend anything? Nothing. I mean, I actually got more from at that time when I was that age, I probably got more information on how to get into comics from Wizard than anything, you know. Because I also didn't have like readily available internet. But there were magazines. There was Sketch, there was Hero. There was different resources to read about stuff. But it was like, man, Wizard was really it. But yeah, if I went back in time, I mean, it depends on the different eras. It's like I think if I was in my college era of years, I think I would have been like, yeah, of course, because I was so cocky in that window. And then real quick, I realized when I was about 21, 22, I was like, oh, this is much harder than I thought it was going to be. Like the ego, a friend of mine has this thing he says, he's like, comics will always find a way to make you humble. We always have shortened it down to like comics will make you humble kind of thing. But yeah, I think early on, like when I was in college, I was like, I'm gonna do Vertigo books, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. Like I was so just cocky, and then immediately like 21, 22, it was like, this is real hard to do this. So I think that if I in that era, I would have been like, yeah, of course I did. But around like 22, I think I would have been much more like, oh, whew, oh, thank God. Like I think I would have been much more like, oh no, this is not gonna happen. And I've had this, and I think that's part of why I'm always there was a window, man, where like I thought I was done. I thought I was done. And it was 2012. Like the end of 2012, I thought it was over. I was like, this is not gonna happen. I gotta figure something else out. It's just not gonna happen. And I already had jobs writing. I had done stuff for DC and Marvel, but it was like I had image stuff, but nothing was clicking. And on Halloween of 2011, I had turned in Ghosted, and I turned in the first issue for Ghosted. It didn't come out until 2013, but I turned it on Halloween. Um, and then it was like, so basically there was a window there where the only thing I was working on was Ghosted, and I thought Ghosted was going to end in issue 5. And it's one of the reasons why one of the reasons why I'm really loyal to Skybound and to Sean Makowitz particularly, is because in that moment when I was like, it's over, like 2012, I'm like, it is over. Skybound and Sean Makowitz 2013, they were the ones that really were like, no, come with us, right? So you're talking about, there was another book I was doing with them that never came out. Like I sat down with Robert and had a lot of conversation with him, but it never came out. But Ghosted and Birthright, it was like those two things in a lot of ways like saved my brain. Because I started working on those before Nailbiter. It's funny because Nailbiter came out before Birthright, but I started working on Birthright before Nailbiter. Those things, and there was also like the trust. Like they had trust in me, and that still applies to now with the G.I. Joe, where it's like Makowitz and Robert and everyone else at Skybound. They really trust me on it, right? And they allow me to kind of have that room to breathe with it, you know, and they trust me to be like, listen, I can, you know, and that's the thing with the Cobra Commander book in particular. It's like I had this weird vision for that book. I had it, and I had a hard time explaining it, but I'm like, I know this book is going to be different. And that's part of why I was telling you it was a horror book, because I was like, it has horror elements. That's why sometimes in interviews I'd be like, it's a weird comic. It's a weird comic, but I can do it. I felt it. And it's like that's the same kind of thing I felt with stuff like Ghosted and Birthright and Nailbiter. I felt it. And that's the same thing I feel with these books, where it's like I feel it. I know it. I know what we're doing. I know it is something that I because another thing to think about, like I worked in a comic book store all through high school, all through college. Like I have put in my time behind the counter. Like, you know, I'm a big comic book nerd, right? It's like at the end of the day, the easiest rule I have is would I like this? Would I buy this? Would I like it? And if I don't, then that's a huge problem. And I talk with other writers, but that's it with these books. With like that's my I guess my real North Star with those things is like when I'm working on Duke and I'm working on Cobra Commander is like, would I like this? Would I do it? And that's how I feel about those books. And so it's been nice to know that like people just like them. I don't know. And also I'm trying to overcomplicate it. I just want to be like, I'm making something I would like, and it's just nice to know that people have been really enjoying it and liking what we're doing.
Is that why you put Cobra-La right into the book right away? Because I did not know about Cobra-La. Then
Oh,
issue
dude.
1 comes out, and I do a little
Well,
research, and I'm like,
and you
oh,
saw
this
there,
is a hot thing.
it's a hot topic. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, dude, it's so funny with Cobra-La. So again, I had those conversations like early on, and a big piece of it was like, oh, you know, I wanted to make sure that if I was ever gonna, it was funny. Like I was thinking this about this a long time ago. Like I would love to do GI Joe and relaunch it, right? Like from like do straight up Ultimate GI Joe basically, and do like there are pieces of it where I was like, okay, I have to show the formation of GI Joe, but then it was also like I have to show the formation of Cobra, and I was like, well, Cobra can't be pre-built, and it's such a weird hodgepodge of people and characters. There has to be something unifying force. They'll hate each other, you know. So it was like the Dreadnoks are one group, right? Like the Shaggy are one group, and then you have Cobra-La. You know, I was like, that is its own group. And so we were breaking this stuff down in the notebook, and then when I started talking to Robert and Sean and Skybound about it, it was like we were all on the same page, and I was like, I love that cartoon. I love that cartoon, and I love that cartoon movie. And I know it is that cartoon movie is contentious. Like there are people that don't like it, and I was like, but I think part of the reason they didn't like it, I'm gonna rewind here and tell you a weird story. I'm gonna rewind here I'm gonna go on a weird tangent, and I will bring it back. I promise. Okay. So in the late 80s, Dark Horse gets the rights to do Alien and Predator comics, right? And they started doing Alien Predator comics, but one of the main things in the Alien comics was Newt, was the girl from the end of Aliens 2, right? So Alien 2,
Oh.
Sigourney Weaver saves this little girl, and they take off, they escape, right? And they're heading home. So Dark Horse did a lot of stuff about Newt. They had whole comics, they built a whole mythology about her, all this stuff, right? So the Dark Horse employees, they go to the Aliens 3. And again, they've done a lot of work on alien stuff and Newt and all this stuff, right? They go to a screening of Aliens 3. They don't know anything about it, nothing about it. They go into it, and if you know this, Newt is dead at the very beginning. She dies. Like she's dead. They basically say she died between 2 and 3 in space. She's dead, right? And they were like, our heart just
Wow.
right, because it was a direct saying what you guys built didn't count, right? And I think that that's part of the Cobra-La of it all, is that Cobra-La, once it was introduced, it contradicted things from the comics and some stuff from the cartoon. It built a contradiction into the story, and I think that is part of why people didn't like it. And I know some people don't like it because the weirdness of it. I love when GI Joe gets weird though. Like I think that's sometimes the better version of it. Is just like get weird and embrace it, you know. Embrace embrace the pieces that are working. And the cartoon definitely was super weird at times, you know. But I think that was part of why. This is again my own opinion on this. There might be other people that are just like Cobra-La for completely different reasons. But I love that cartoon, and so for me, I had no idea. So here's the thing. I had no idea the cartoon was content, like the movie was a contentious thing until way later in life. So I was a kid. I bought those toys. I had Nemesis Enforcer toy. I had a Gobulus toy. I had the Royal Guard. I had a Mercer toy, and I had all those characters. And I had Chuckles. I loved it. Had no clue until my early 20s when I was talking to somebody who was like a hardcore GI Joe fan, and they were like, "I hate Cobra-La." I was like, "What are you talking about? That stuff was awesome." And they were like, "No." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" I had no clue, right? So when we started working on this, I started talking to Robert and Sean, and they were like, "No, we love the movie. We love it. We love that cartoon movie. We love it. We love it." And I was like, "Oh, cool. All right." So I started talking about it. And then I was like, "Well, here's the thing. If we're gonna go that path, we have to go that path from the start." Because again, that was the thing. And I figured out ways of merging the continuities and merging the pieces of it, like of what works, of like his comic book origin plus the cartoon origin. There's easy, clean ways, and it's like very hinted at in the story, of how I merged those two origins together. But I think that was it, like starting off from it here. It allowed us to embrace the weirdness, but also it made it so we're automatically not contradicting ourselves or contradicting this other continuity. Like we're acknowledging it and then trying to find ways of putting it together, right? Like building out from that. And yeah, it is funny. I was curious how the response was gonna be just because of Cobra-La. That's why I was like, all right, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna straight up do this like grounded opening, very a bit more horror vibe with Cobra Commander, and then giant 2-page spread of Cobra-La. just boom, here's Cobra-La, and just be like, we're going for it.
But you know
And
what?
we're taking a swing. Yeah, go for it.
It's just funny because you're talking about how controversial it is and how people don't
Yeah.
like it and all this stuff. And I open that exact same spread and I go, "Oh shit, that's crazy. That's cool. Like, what is this?"
Yeah, exactly.
And
Oh, yeah.
like,
Yeah. No, even the people I know who hate Cobra-La, like they've come around on it. They've come around on what we're doing because again, we're not contradicting anything. We're not telling them that something that they did didn't count. We're building something new with it, and we're trying to take what we love of that thing and then build it out. What were you gonna say, Tyler?
I was gonna say, and then like just the fact that it's part of this bigger universe with Transformers, like there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of things that can happen with that.
Yeah, it gives us some leeway. It
Yeah.
gives us some leeway. The Transformers part obviously gives a lot of leeway because the introduction of Energon and the
Yep.
fact that that's what Cobra Commander is like. I want this, and then there's other things that Cobra Commander wants. We've kind of hinted at that we haven't like got too deep into yet because there's other things that he wants, and you can tell without getting too much into spoilers. There's that thing that Gabula says in 5 of like he's like we are the flesh, they are the metal kind of thing, right? Like that's not exactly what it says, but without getting too deep into spoilers, it's like there is a war of metal and organic coming, right? Like that is something that's in there. And then where does Cobra Commander fall into that is really, it's interesting. I mean, Cobra Commander, it's funny like with Cobra Commander because when I told you this before, but it was like originally the idea was to be a Duke book, and then it would be just Duke, and then it'd be Void Rivals and Transformers, but the Cobra Commander would be somehow connected through. But the more we talked about it, the more and more Cobra Commander was taking on a bigger role and a bigger life. And I was like, if you really want to do this right, we can't do one panel stuff with him. We got to do more. And that's when it was like, well, why don't we do a Cobra Commander book? And they were like, well, would you write it? And I'm like, yeah, I'd have to because of the way I wanted to do it, and it worked out. It just worked out. Like I had a lot of fun writing this book, and I had a lot of fun writing Duke. And yeah, I'm really excited about the stuff that we're talking about. It's been really fun. I'm really glad you guys liked it. That's really what it comes down to. Is people. I'm just glad you guys liked it. Yeah.
And I think they're great companion pieces too. Like Duke is super reactionary, and he's we know more than Duke, but in Cobra Commander he knows more than us. So seeing those two stories happen at the same time was really.
I tried to make it so you notice the way it works is that like in the beginning of Duke he feels so at the beginning of Duke he feels rejected by the system, right? He feels like they have failed him, and he goes through this experience, and at the end of the experience he says, I'm gonna go back in, right? Like I'm gonna do the thing, I'm gonna go back in, I'm gonna trust them, I'm gonna trust Hawk, and I'm going to go back, basically, right? Like his crisis of faith is better, right? He goes back, and then you go over here to Cobra Commander, And at the beginning, he feels embraced because of Gabi's being like, I trust you. I'm going to see you on this mission. Right. So they started in opposite places. But then by the time we get to the end of Cobra, he is not only he is betrayed and rejecting. So he's betrayed by Cobra-La, but now he's also rejecting it. So it was on purpose. I made it so they literally went on opposite journeys. Like they started off opposite places and they ended opposite places. And then there's going to be conflict there, but it was like
Oh yeah.
that was the goal of that, was to make it so that you would feel this journey they were on together, right? But they're not. That's one thing that's kind of funny about this whole thing, right? Like they do not know each other. They do not know each other exists, but they are influencing each other, and then you have the stuff where it's like Duke met Destro, and because of what happened with Destro, that impacted when Cobra Commander met Destro. Because I don't think Destro would have given Cobra Commander the time of day if it hadn't been what happened with Duke, right? So it's like these things. It's like they're on these journeys that are influencing each other, completely unaware of each other. Duke and Cobra Commander, they have no idea who each other are. They're not even at all, but they know about Transformers, right? Like Duke is very aware of Transformers now. He knows about Starscream, he knows Optimus Prime, but he knows about the bats. And then you have, isn't it funny? Like the two people. So like Duke is basically at the ending, like I'm gonna kill Optimus Prime, and then at the beginning over here is Cobra Commander being like, I'm just gonna torture Megatron. Like it's this interesting like parallels we were able to pull together with the book, but that was always built into it. I mean, I like stuff like that. I mean, I find that Hickman does this a lot. Like obviously he did with Hoxpox, but if you, I'm in the middle of rereading all of Hickman's Avengers. It is crazy how Avengers and New Avengers, they're just parallel journeys,
Oh my god.
parallel journeys, and it's crazy. I didn't read those books. I remember reading the beginning of them, but I think I fell off at some point. But then I came back in when Secret Wars happened. But with those books, I was I don't know how those are read in single issues. Like, but when you read it now, and it's tough because you have to read it in order, so you are kind of bouncing back and forth. And reading in order doesn't mean you're reading it the same months they were coming out. You have to like read a little bit here, read a little bit there, read a little bit here. It's like it's fascinating, but I was definitely influenced by that process. And now it's something that I think about a lot, where I'm like, oh, this is definitely something I could see myself doing down the line. I mean, you can look at what like Rom and Dan Waters are doing at Image. They have those two books, right? It's funny with those two books. I'll tell you the thing with those. So Rom had told me about those two books, like, I don't know, a year and a half ago or something like that. And then he sent me the PDFs to read. And then I read the first issues and I was like, oh, okay, this is how he's doing it. But I knew already. I knew they were the same case from 2 points of view from a year ago. And so him and I were texting and he was like, when did you figure out they were connected? And I was like, a year and a half ago you told me. What are we talking about? I was like, and he was like, oh, and I'm like, oh, was I supposed to be surprised? I was like, well, I'm not the one for that because he told me about it already.
I feel like he sold it as such, even in like interviews with us. He
Did he
sold
really?
it as
Yeah,
such.
I wasn't sure if that was supposed to be a secret or not, but yeah, I know it's not a secret now. I know that's out there now. I mean, you look at the covers and you're like, oh, clearly,
Yeah.
There's no surprise. There's no surprise. But they're great. I love them.
Yeah.
But
the
I
one
love
hand
that.
and the six fingers, by the way. Amazing.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
No
I like that kind of thing. I think it's interesting looking at that. And then you look at, I mean, it's really shared universes in general. And then you look at the fact that things that are happening in Transformers impact, the Duke and Cobra Commander. And then you have things that are happening in Void Rivals that impact things. And then, things are going to feed back in. It's fun, dude. I love all this stuff. I like it.
Yeah, and we like it too, and our audience seems to love it. We get a lot of comments on our Discord server about these books and how exciting it all
Yeah.
is. And I want to say again, if you hear this, that means that Cobra Commander 5 is out, which means that
Yeah.
Duke and Cobra Commander, you can get them both. This is the ground floor. Like it's so exciting to be able to start fresh with something. And yes, it has all the history and it is being honored, but it's also doing its own thing in ways that feel fresh and unique. And I can't wait for more. If you could just spend a couple minutes, like what is we know about Destro, we know that's coming, we know Scarlet is coming, and
yeah,
those have
yeah.
incredible creative teams.
Oh yeah. I mean, like Marco and Kelly. I have known Kelly for a while. We never got to work. We've talked about DC stuff. I was always an advocate for Kelly to come over to DC and do stuff. Like she's doing a great Birds of Prey book right now. But really early on, it was like, well, who's gonna do Scarlet? Who knows gonna be Scarlet? And I was like, Kelly. It can only be Kelly. Like, and then what we find out is that Kelly is this huge G.I. Joe fan. She is a huge G.I. Joe fan. Scarlett's one of her favorite characters, and she knows it. Like, I remember the first call I had with Kelly, like, she came prepared. It was one of those things where, like, she came up and she was like, I have ideas. And was just telling me stuff, and I was like, I got nothing to say. Let her go. Like, let her do her
cook.
thing. She's got it. Yeah, I was like,
She's
I have one request
too.
for you. It was like one thing I need you to do. Obviously there was other stuff because like we're part of a universe. So there's little bits and pieces of things. But I was like, here's my request for you. This and this. And same with Dan. Like Dan came into it. It's funny with Dan. Dan didn't really know much about this stuff, but he quickly got into it, and then he started looking at stuff. And he and I just talked about who Destro was as a character a lot. And then it was like, now go, and obviously Andre on Destro is like, my close friends. We did Birthright and Darkrai together. I'm really excited to see. It's weird because it's the first time that Andre has really worked with somebody else in 10 years. So seeing him draw somebody else's scripts, I'm really excited about it, but it's weird.
Yeah.
But I'm really excited about it, and I'm like, dude, this looks dope. Like, there's a part, it's in the preview pages where the bats are coming at us and stuff, and I was like, man, Andre, dude, this is dope. Like, I was like, oh, next time we work together, I have other challenges for you. I have other crazy for you. But it's great, and and the stuff that we're building out, we're just continuing to build this world and build out this like tapestry for this our corner, like the G.I. Joe corner of it. And then you'll keep seeing how these things are coming together and how they're influencing each other. And I think there'll be some like definite surprises. But yeah, I love everything we're doing. I don't want to spoil stuff for Transformers and Void Rivals, even though I know what they're doing, and they're doing bonkers stuff. There's some stuff coming in that I think people will be really excited about.
So I don't know if it's been announced yet. I haven't seen it, but I don't. What are your next projects in this world, in the Energon universe, and are you going to be involved in the long haul?
I'm definitely involved in the long haul. I mean, I'm definitely working on stuff, and I definitely keep talking to Skybound. But otherwise, I don't know. It's classified, man. I don't know what to tell you.
You get to use classified.
Well, classified. I don't know, man. It's above my pay grade, But yeah, we definitely have some really cool stuff coming. So I would just, I guess, like stay tuned. Keep your eyes on the channel, kind of thing. There's some stuff coming that I think people will be excited about.
So the shipwreck ongoing is coming, right? I don't want. Can I spoil that?
I gotta figure. Okay. I don't know how. I haven't figured the shipwreck part out yet. I know I want to do them because the thing about shipwreck's really funny. I'll say this and then I have to go. The funny thing about Shipwreck is that his voice, the cartoon, is based off Jack Nicholson, right? Like he's supposed to be Jack Nicholson. So me trying to figure out how do I do that? How do I basically have Jack Nicholson as a sailor, which there's a movie. So, I mean, there's stuff you can watch. Like that's where they got it from. But how do I pull that off in the comic is the thing I'm trying to figure out.
That's awesome.
Also, he's like one of my favorite actors of all time. So, like, Shipwreck will be a thing. Trust me. I'm gonna figure some Shipwreck stuff out. But I gotta
cool.
There's some. I want to make sure that's the thing with all these characters. You want to make sure they're introduced in the best way possible.
Yeah.
For all of them, right? Like nobody is left behind or nobody's shoved in the background. You want to make sure they have a moment. So where someone like Shipwreck, I got ideas. So it's about pulling those things together and making some cool Shipwreck stuff. But yeah, I love that character. I got that toy right there too. He's awesome.
Yeah, it's a good toy.
He's a good one. Yeah.
Well, we can't wait to see what the future holds for the Energon universe, your involvement, and everybody else's. It's truly been exciting. And Josh, you are always welcome here. I'm jealous of Sal because Comic Pop gets you.
Yeah,
I watch it. I watch it every time. The one you just did with Chip oh my God. Yeah. I could talk to you for an hour about that conversation.
Oh yeah, that was really fun. Yeah, I love those guys. I mean, yeah, me and Sal have known each other for a while. It's like that's just my monthly one that he and I do, and it's good times. Are you guys going to San Diego at all? You two?
Unfortunately not, but we will be at New York.
Okay, then I will see you in New York then. Perfect.
Yes.
Maybe we can talk more there and hang out and stuff and talk about comic books.
Absolutely.
All right, I'll let you guys go. I'm gonna take off. Yes. But always good talking to you. Thank you again for having me on. You guys are great. It's always good to talk comics with both of you guys. And yeah, I guess I'll catch you later.
Absolutely. Energon Universe, Cobra Commander
Yeah.
5
Yeah.
out today. Make sure you guys go pick that up. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you in the next one. Take care.
Thank you.